Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our May Council meeting. It's great to have everybody together around the room again and to traverse some of the issues that we've got before us tonight, which are reasonably important ones to go forward. I do have an apology for the lateness from Councillor Nick Grant, but I'm not aware of any other apologies. Would somebody like to move that those apologies be sustained, please? Thank you, Doug. Seconded, Stuart. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, the motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Okay, are there any conflicts of interest that councillors are aware of at this point in time in the agenda that they need to declare? If there's not, we'll move on then. We'll move on to the confirmation of the minutes, and we have a number of minutes there to confirm. So would somebody like to confirm that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of council held on Wednesday 15 April be confirmed as true and correct? Move, Councillor Reid. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Phillips, thank you. All those in favour, or is there any alteration to that record? There's not. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, the motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Would somebody like to move the confirmation of the minutes of the extraordinary meeting of council held 22 April? Councillor McDonnell, seconded Councillor Doug Grant. Thank you. Is there any alteration required to that motion? There's not. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, the motion is carried. Right. Confirmation of the minutes of the extraordinary meeting of council held 28 April. Would somebody like to move that they be seen as true and correct? Councillor Dixon, thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Bolger, thank you. Any alteration required to those minutes? There's not. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, the motion's carried. Right. Item 4, urgent late business. I'm not aware of any urgent late business that needs to be tabled, but councillors, is there any that you have? There's not. Thank you. We'll move on then to item 5, and we have the financial report of council, and we've got a memo from the accountant Donna here. Thank you, Donna. Do you want to make any comment to your report before I open it up for discussions or questions?
Certainly, Your Worship. So even though the figures are for the end of March, a lot has happened since then to our financials. So I'll just continue with the March figures as I have a report later on talking about future predictions. So the total revenue is lower than budget by $23,000, with expenses being higher than budget by $1,331,000 and an overall unfavourable variance of $1,355,000. So revenue is mainly in line with budgets, with the exception of lower NZTA subsidies. Expenses are higher than predicted, largely due to the February flood expenses, which have now been allocated to their respective departments. While most of the departments have been able to accommodate these expenses within their current budgets, the three waters and solid waste areas have incurred a significant amount of these costs. This is due to flooding response and maintenance cost expenditure, along with the remediation work carried out on the old landfill sites. So we're still in discussions with the National Emergency Management Agency, but these are currently on hold due to COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Okay, so councillors, open for discussion. Your questions of Donna and Stuart, and then Bronwyn.
Did you say Stuart?
Yeah.
Donna, other financial liabilities in the balance sheet have gone up just under $1 million. Is that due to interest rates reducing, therefore the swaps are effectively more expensive?
Hang on, let me just have a look. Other financial liabilities. I believe so. It's just due to the timing of it. So that would have been what was at 30 June last year, and then what we've got now.
Yeah, because interest rates keep reducing, the swaps keep becoming more and more expensive to us because they're at a fixed rate and the rate goes down.
Yeah.
It's $1 million we've incurred in a year. Yeah, it's a significant amount of money these interest swaps cost us.
They do.
No real value in my opinion anyway. But we'll discuss that later when we come to I want to discuss that a lot further when we come to the discussion on the swaps and stuff. Thanks. That's all I've got to comment.
Oh.
So those swaps are a legacy, I understand. So they've been in place for quite some time, and
we're still doing them. We're still doing them. We did one in March. Sorry.
So, okay, Councillor Highsted, do you want to make a comment there?
Yeah, probably just a comment in relation to this has been discussed, Audit and Risk Committee. We have a finance policy that requires us to take fixed rate. The appropriateness policy was reviewed last year, but I'm guessing Stuart's going to probably ask the right question. Things have changed a lot. Time to review it again. So we'll get to that later on when we see the Bancourt report, I suggest.
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you. So Bronwyn, do you want to make any comment here? You're on mute, Bronwyn. Sorry.
Apologies. Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks, Donna. And I don't know whether this is the appropriate time, but I was looking at some of the things in the schedule, the Waikaka Stream landfill. Now, apparently there were samples sent off to a lab for testing, and I wondered what had come back from that, from the old landfill site.
Sorry, that wouldn't be a question for me. That would be for the infrastructure manager.
Yeah. No worries. Yep, thank you. It was just that it was in amongst your report, so. Yep.
Okay. So just while we're on that, Ramesh, is there a comment on that at all?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I think for contamination testing before we do the remediation work at the Waikaka Stream old landfill area, that was required part of the remediation program. I think we have undertaken it, and then based on the outcome of that, we are trying to implement that procedure to comply with the ES guidelines.
So we haven't had a response, is that what I'm hearing?
Response from where?
So you asked the question, Bronwyn, about lab testing?
For contaminants.
I think there are some asbestos and other contaminants were there. I think we did get a report. I think Peter has a copy of that report.
Okay.
I think that is why we have to follow a different protocol to store it and before we take it to the Invercargill landfill area.
Okay, so Peter, do you want to make a comment there?
For your worship, yeah. There was initial testing done of the actual site before we started shifting it around. There was low levels of asbestos contaminants in there, but they felt safe enough for us to work with. Any waste we've actually taken from the actual site, we've actually got stored on the site. There's 3 sites, so each site has actually got a storage area. So that material in itself is going to actually be tested before we decide what to do. At the moment, it looks like it's pretty low contaminant and we're going to have to be able to cover it. We're going to be able to cover it over it, but that testing will be done on that material. And if it is too contaminated, it will be taken to a secure site down in AB Lime. So the testing of the material we've taken out is still yet to be done.
So a work in progress.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So other questions around this financial report? There's not. John, look as though you're finding yourself for something there.
Yeah, just there's one there on the capital expenditure on the roading program is progressing with 65% of the capital expenditure spent. Permanent bridge construction is now almost complete. I presume the budget for the capital expenditure for roading would include the old price for the bridge. And so this, some of that 65% will never get to 100%. Is that right?
That would be correct.
Yeah. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Other questions, queries? There's not. Would somebody like to move that the report be received, please?
Question, Tracy. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Doug, I didn't see it.
Is my electronic hand raised, or did I push it? Did I not push it?
Oh,
Got it. Never mind.
yes.
Are we, because the draft district plan civil defence claim is sitting in this report, can we, do you want to discuss that later, or can you discuss this now, because there's a question in there I was wanting?
Look, there's no reason why it can't be discussed now. The claim, this is the claim you're talking about?
Yeah, the claim, yeah.
So I understand that it's on hold, Donna, is it? Through the COVID process?
Yes, so we've been in discussions with Rob Rouse, who's our contact there, and he is busy with COVID-19. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll be able to resume those talks.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Tracy. My question was around the subtotal estimated cost of just the Gore landfill and the material landfill part. It's we've got an $80,000 to $150,000 to $150,000, and that's work includes the consulting, engineering, and survey, project management services, and consulting planning. We've got planners within the council. Steve might answer this one. We've got planners that such as Dean Balkin and whatever, and there's a new planner come on board. Is that beyond their extent of what they do for preparation for the resource consents? Because a consultancy fee is somewhere between $80,000 and $150,000.
So, Steve, do you want to make a comment there?
Yeah, I can't make a specific comment in terms of the competency of the staff concerned. I can assure you that they're competent. Bear in mind, this work came at us like literally as a tsunami of issues that we're confronted with, so our engineering team, what you find is that they've farmed some of the work out to a consultancy, and with that consultancy comes a planning arm as well. So it's very difficult it's not as efficient having someone doing some design work, for example, from a civil engineering company, and often these companies will have a planning staff in-house that works with them hand in hand to actually deal with all aspects of the project. So that's probably why it is presented to you the way it is. It would be a bit unusual and probably somewhat messy to have the engineering design prepared by an outside consultancy and the planning function being performed by our own staff.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Just my other question, Your Worship, was probably to Ramesh. Is this going to be a permanent fix for the Waikaka stream and the material input, or is this temporary? Because we're paying, well, for Gore landfill is $700 to $950 estimated, and the material one's $200 to $400. So is this a permanent fix, or is it a temporary fix, or what's the lifespan?
Through Your Worship, I think at this moment we have planned for a temporary fix. As Donna alluded and Steve mentioned about that, the cost of the planning. As per the funding policy of NEMA agency, if we use our in-house so resources, those staff times are not recoverable. And these are the quantum of the claim we are trying to produce it. If we are able to manage within our team, council's resources, I think they expect that to happen because without compromising the existing council services or the service deliverables. So we have produced a quantum of claim where we included a lot of cost associated with consultants. We are engaging consultant as and on required basis where really it is seriously required. Majority of projects are managed by Peter in-house, and some areas Hashim is involved in that. But those quantum of claims submitted is assuming that we can reduce our staff and keep focus of our staff in normal services. That is other thing. And as regards to your question about this, estimated claims are produced based on the contractor's estimate for temporary fix or interim fix.
So,
sorry, Doug. Can I just jump in there for 2 seconds? So with that response, Ramesh, thank you. Just going back to the nature of temporary as opposed to permanent. So the inference, I guess, here is that temporary is something that has to be done again or completed later on. Is that the case here, or is this something that is substantially completed?
I think, in my view, I think the way we are progressing, it may look like a little long-term solution, but still we have to do some leachate assessment. So we, at this moment, we are unable to say this is a permanent solution. If this is a permanent, so there is another hook associated with that is, if we consider this as a permanent solution, we cannot claim it to the NEMA funding agency. For NEMA funds only like-to-like replacement of the existing landfill.
So
which is really a debatable
are important. Yeah. Okay, so that answer your question, Doug? Yeah. So Nicky, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. Towards the end of the report, under the liabilities, there's a comment that borrowing has risen by 5.5 million from last year, but there's no breakdown of what that entails. Is Donna able to give us a breakdown of what that actually consists of, please?
Not at this point in time. We have uploaded a little bit in March, and that was mainly for the building upgrade and also for the Pyramid Bridge work that had been done to date.
Yeah, just on that, it would have been good to see a breakdown of what that 5.5 million was made up of, just so we can see that we're on track with all of our projects and how we're actually progressing with our projects. So can I ask that that be done in the next report, that we actually see what that entails?
Certainly, I can look into that for you for the next report.
Thank you.
Neville, do you have a question?
I did, thanks, Tracy. Just referring to what Ramesh had said about the transfer, the monitor. Is there going to have extra monitoring at these sites on the river edges, Ramesh, on those two, one Matera and one in Gore, the Waikaga?
Through your worship, the landfill, all old landfill requires providing the evidence that there is nothing obnoxious leaching into the stream. I think that is a requirement, I think, which we will monitor eventually.
Right, so there'll be further monitoring at those two sites at extra cost. Yeah, okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. So Doug, did you have another question? I finally saw your hand, that's right. Bret.
Yeah, thanks. Just through your question for Donna, just following on from Nicky's question, we borrowed in advance due to the interest rate differential. I see we've got about $3 million in cash equivalents. Donna, are we still investing against our loans, or is that largely complete now?
That is largely complete at this stage. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Righto. Any other questions of the report? If not, would somebody like to move that it be received? Do I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Grant, Doug, and seconded Councillor Reid. Thank you. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, the motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. So it brings us on to the dog control report for the year, and I think we've got a report from the admin manager on policy and practices over the past year. Just an outline of what's happened and how it's progressed through the year. So, Susan, have you got any comment or do you want to make to this before we open it for discussion?
Thank you, Worship. Not really. It was just under my name. It had been prepared by the previous General Manager of Regulatory Services, and it only came to light recently that it hadn't been presented to the Council. So, and it does refer to the end of last financial year, June 2019.
Okay, councillors, I think it's reasonably self-explanatory. It's something that has to be done every year. So it's open for discussion or questions. If there is no discussion, would somebody like to move its receipt and adoption, please?
Sorry,
Can I ask a question, please?
Oh, sorry, yes. Councillor, yeah, Glenys, do you want to?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wondered, this is not particularly about the report, but I'm just wondering if the dog parks, if they've been completed, did they come in on budget?
Yeah, so this, you're right, it doesn't relate to this report at all, I don't think. Is anybody able to give us an update on that at this point in time? I know that we can get one and come back to council, but who's Ramesh or Steve, do you want to make any comment here at all?
As far as I'm aware, Your Worship, they were within budget. I've had no information to me to suggest they're not, but I can't give you a categoric answer. I'm not sure whether any other staff member can, because Ian Soper was really in charge of those two projects, both Matara and Gore. I'm not sure, Donna, whether you have had a look at the costings. They were, off memory, they were about $28,000 budgets each part, I think. Is that right?
Unfortunately, that's something that I don't have to hand at the moment. The only thing I can contribute is that they are complete, but it's still something that I have to put the figures together for the budget.
Grant,
yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Just a question. I'm not sure who would answer it, but page 26, you got the registration fee, urban dog 120 minus your A, B, and C, and then the next sentence under that is registration fee inclusive of A, B, and C. Should that read exclusive? Because if you include that, you're saying, this is just my thinking, I could be barking right up the wrong here. Excuse the pun. But so registration less the fence control, less the dogs, and less the neutered comes to $60 you're paying. Registration fee inclusive of A, B, and C. Should that be exclusive of A, B, and C? Because if it was exclusive, it means if you don't have your fence controlled, if there's no complaints and if there's no spade, it's 60. But if it's exclusive of any of those, then it's 150. A, B, and C. Is that right? Or am I just nitpicking? It just read wrong to me. I read it about 3 times. I'm thinking it could be where I was brought up. But
I think, through Your Worship, I think it's a matter of how you it's a matter of interpretation. What it means to say that if you don't have a fence and your dog not desexed and you've got past history, you get the higher fee. Perhaps it can be worded better. I'm more than happy to massage that so that the reader's under no sense of ambiguity.
Yeah, I think so. That would be great, Steve, because just to me, I've read it inclusive of A, B, and C, meaning if you've got A, B, and C, that's the fee above. Just thanks.
Good point. And that can be rectified. Okay, any other questions?
Your Worship. Your Worship.
Yeah, Neville.
Just that I haven't noticed the record symbol on my iPad. Is it being recorded, the meeting?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Oh, that's fine. Fine, thank you.
Okay. Would somebody like to move that this be adopted and received? So, Councillor Grants, seconded Councillor McDonnell. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Right, that brings us on to item 7, which is green waste disposal. And we have a report from General Manager of Infrastructure and Eroding Asset Manager around the green waste and how we are handling it. And we really need to have this signed off tonight or altered so that we can carry on doing what we currently are doing. So who's going to speak to this one? Is this Peter or Ramesh? Peter?
Yep. For your worship, look, we've just had overwhelming thumbs up for having the green waste down at the transfer station. It's been very busy. But actually the station's handling it well, the staff and the space we have there. So I suppose our thoughts here were, because we are making a change at the end of June and to free green waste, we're just concerned about the mixed messages, like coming back to payment and then only for 6 weeks later to change to free again. So we were just thinking, for a number of reasons, why this would be a good time to actually just continue on with obviously there's a lot of goodwill out there at the moment towards council, especially with this where people are, as they, giving a thumbs up to council when we're down there. So just put it in front of you, that might be a good thing just to continue.
Okay, councillors, this is open for discussion or adoption. Certainly the feedback that I've had has been overwhelmingly supportive of the process and the recognition that council is making for some of the challenges people have. Okay, Councillor Phillips.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just that we haven't had a formal discussions about whether or not the green waste will be carried on in Matera under free dumping in Matera. I've had preliminary talks with the community board, and we want to have open discussion about whether or not we shut down the transfer station in Matera in regards to green waste. We're having an on-site meeting on Saturday morning at 11:30 with the community board and myself to bring forward some ideas to Ramesh about what we like to bring forward in regards to the green waste and also to the total recycling. So I see it in the recommendation that it's only got transfer station at the moment. So I'd just like to put in that we have a think about Matera and what we're going to do for the future Matera in regards to the green waste. And I believe that we shouldn't shut the green waste to Matera, because while you may be able to come to Gore with your groceries and bring a trailer and take your green waste, I think it's too inconvenient for a resident in a town of this size not to have at least a green waste dumping station.
Okay, no, good point, well made, and it'll be interesting to see how that discussion proceeds. But as far as I'm aware, this relates to the Gore transfer station. Is that right? And probably needs some clarity around that in the recommendation. Sorry, Chief Executive. Steve?
Yeah, Your Worship, I think the key point here is to this recommendation really only applies from now through to the end of June, as we have a separate resolution to take us from 1 July onward. The second key point is that we're currently moving from level 3 to level 2, where there is still expectations that services will be carefully administered to prevent the spread of any COVID-19 virus. So this is still in a temporary limited state, and as Councillor Phillips has said, the wider discussion about what type of service delivery should be applied to Matera is beyond the reach of this particular report, but can certainly come back for discussion at a council level once it's been through the board's deliberative process.
Okay.
So, but my question at the moment is, even though we're going back into level 2, and we can have some sort of control of green waste dumping in Matera, why should it not continue?
So from a practical perspective, in terms of the dealing with the volume of any green waste, or the control of it on the site, Peter, do you want to make any comment there?
For your worship, look, at the moment, sort of thing, this is being run by the volunteers for the bowling club, and because of the age and the restrictions there have been around aged workers and the requirement that we have for track and tracing, just for simplicity and to the end of this whole pandemic lockdown, we had decided that we're just going to keep Matera closed, but no decision's been made at what point it will reopen.
Okay, look, I think the idea that has been put forward that there's going to be a discussion about the future with the community board and a recommendation coming back to council is probably the best way forward now on Matera, rather than making a decision on the hoop here and then finding that we can't manage it quite as well as we'd planned. But I'm open for any other suggestions that might come along. Okay, there's not. Right, so we need to have a recommendation that the report be received and that council agree to free disposal of green waste at the transfer station, which should read the Gore transfer station at this point, with Matera yet to be considered formally, and for the next period.
You wish to move that recommendation?
Move Councillor Davis, thank you. Do I have a seconder for that?
I'll second.
Councillor Dixon, thank you. Is there any further discussion on that one? There's not. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, the motion is carried. Actually, before we move on to the next item, can we decide whether we're going to have our hands up physically or virtually? It's a bit confusing just working out who's doing what. So from now on, if anybody wants to ask a question, can you please put your hand up electronically or virtually, so I can see the list now quite clearly. But it's a bit hard to jump back and forth between the screens and down the side. So I've got two up there at the moment. I've got Councillor Phillips and Councillor Highsted. Are they live? Not. Okay. Right.
Can I just ask something?
Mm-hmm.
Did you notice my hand up earlier? Because I had it up for about 5 minutes.
Did you? So I'm sorry about that, Nicky. I apologise.
Yeah, no, because I'm just wondering if you can actually see it. It's not up now, but I'll put it on now and see if you can actually see it.
Yeah, no, I can certainly see that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So.
Your worship, can we all please mute too? I'm getting flicks between Glenys and Cliff and you. When pages get turned, it would be quite handy if we're all on mute.
Yep. No, good point. Righto. Let's move on to the next item, which is Bancorp Treasury Report. We've got a 3-month report going up to the 31st of March, which again seems like an age away, and certainly will be an age away in what it tells us compared to what we're going forward to. But Steve, do you want to introduce this one? Who's speaking to this?
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. As you say, it is very historical and it does seem like a lifetime ago. I do know that Mr. O'Connor, the author of the report, is intending to attend the next Audit and Risk Committee meeting, which is scheduled for 27 May, and I think will provide somewhat of a different story than what is portrayed in this particular commentary. And we certainly receive daily updates as to what is occurring in the marketplace and the events in the world that generate the market behaviour. I guess, despite the strange times we live in, the market seemed to be not really mirroring in such a sharp degree the kind of volatile behaviour that we have in some parts of the world. But we do live in very strange times, and as Councillor McDonnell has noted, that we're governed by a policy in terms of our borrowings, but those policy settings may well be due for further discussion and review given these times we're in, and the commentary around how long-term the very low interest rate environment we're in is likely to be with us. So it may actually behove the council to review once again its policy settings. But having said all those things, if we are doing a review, it will have to go through the special consultative procedure, and most likely would be profiled in next year's long-term plan.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Highsted, Bret, you want to make any comment here?
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, just the Audit and Risk Committee, when it last considered the policy, also was looking towards forming a Treasury Advisory Subcommittee to work with the CFO and Bancorp and perhaps the independent member of Audit and Risk to enable us to be a bit more nimble and take advantage of a particular circumstance and perhaps enable variance in policy. So on the meeting of 27th May, I'll certainly be exploring that again, and hopefully bring something back to council, because it seems to take a terrible amount of time for Bancorp to make minor tweaks to the policy, which was a wee bit frustrating the last time we did it last year.
Okay. Councillor Gardine, John, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just had a wee bit of a concern with the another swap being added onto the list, and I'm just wondering whether we shouldn't do any more swaps until we have that audit and risk meeting on the 27th and have a reasonably full discussion about that, because I can't see the reason for taking the other swap out when you're doubling the interest rate.
Okay, so I'm just going back to how we can change that policy and the comments you made, Steve, about so special consultative procedure. Does that reflect what John's suggesting there, that might have to happen if we did make a change?
Your liability policy is one of those suite of policies that gets reviewed every 3 years through your long-term plan. I'd need to just check on what the absolute content of that policy is relative to how much detail it goes into. But in principle, if you amend that policy, it has to be through a consultation process, and most councils do that every 3 years, and any tweakings go into your LTP and therefore is available for the public to make comment on. But the Audit and Risk Committee have debated quite at length the ratio between fixed versus floating interest rate exposure, and that off the top of my head, and I haven't got the policy in front of me, is often a cornerstone of your liability policy that is reviewed every 3 years.
Okay. Well, I'll take the point that Councillor Garline's making, and something that if we're going to avoid incurring costs by making changes like this, we should, but we do need to make sure that we're doing it correctly as well. Councillor Dixon, you had a question?
Yes, I'm just wondering, I see that we have a committed bank facility at the ANZ Bank for 3 million, and it expires on the 20th of June. Will we be rolling that over, or will it, are we going to utilise it somehow?
Who's going to answer that question?
Probably Donna, if she is able.
At this stage, I'm unaware of what we are doing with that. My apologies, I'll have to look into that one.
Councillor Gardine and then Councillor Highsted.
That bank facility is costing us about 33,000 a year to hold. I just wondered whether we haven't actually used it for quite a while, whether we should actually reduce it down to 1 million, or we should discuss that at the audit and risk in depth. And I think it needs quite an in-depth discussion on that, and changing our swaps and using bonds for lengthily swapping things around. I think we need to have a real good discussion on the whole situation and still staying within our policy.
You're dead right. The right venue and time for this is the audit and risk meeting for a discussion. And if any councillor is not on that committee and wants to be part of it, then they certainly can be, so they can have an input. Councillor Highsted.
Yeah, I guess I need to respond to a couple of things, because audit and risk spent quite a bit of time on the hedging profile. Firstly, on page 39, you'll see the reason why the latest swap was taken. Our policy requires us to stay within those bands. So we don't want staff guessing what they need to do. The policy informs staff that at that point they need to take a hedge or a swap to stay within policy. So that's the first thing I think we should clarify. Secondly, calling swaps a cost, that they're an insurance, and you're just comparing floating rate to fixed rate, and fixed rates at this stage are more expensive. That is deemed to be prudent, that the council doesn't have all its debt floating. That might be wrong, but unfortunately that is our policy, and it has a level of prudence. So while they're more expensive, it's an insurance premium. It's not necessarily a cost, because you're just comparing to borrowing floating rates. And in terms of swaps versus bonds, the cost is very similar, but the reason we take swaps is it allows us to anticipate debt. Bonds do not allow you to do that. We have a capital expenditure program in front of us that we need to anticipate adhering to our policy, because our policy requires us to not only fix existing debt, but projected debt. And you can't do that necessarily easily with bonds. So hence the swaps are there, and they are a synthetic, so they do appear on our balance sheet. So I've probably bored you enough, but yeah, just rest assured, audit and risk haven't sat on our hands on this one.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Highsted, and I think that's a timely interjection or observation there. I think we do need to bear in mind that we do have this audit and risk committee that is functioning, and it's functioning well, in my opinion, and it's there to protect council and the ratepayers on a long-term basis rather than a knee-jerk basis. But I also hear the call for being flexible and being able to be nimble and do what we can. So that really a discussion at audit and risk with the relevant people in the room who can advise us properly is the time to be making those decisions. Probably not now. Councillor McDonnell, you had a question? You're on mute, Stuart.
They do cost you cash. They are costing us about 400 grand a year in extra interest as at today, if you calculate it out. And that's a sizable chunk of the council's revenue going out. And at the moment, I know it's historic, but if you continue to do it, you can just continue to pay money away that you don't have to, because the interest rates are going to stay low for a long time. And there are other mechanisms that we can discuss about how to go around this without causing the council undue risk. But we'll leave that to audit and risk.
Okay. Are there any other questions? I can't see any other hands there at this point in time. If not, would somebody like to move that the Treasury report be received and noted? Councillor Grant, Doug, and Councillor Bolger. Thank you, seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, the motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. We'll move on then to revenue and forecasting, or revenue forecasting for the year 30 June, which is a bit of a difficult one to write at the moment, but we have a memo here from the Chief Executive with a list of where things are up and down, or mainly down, I'd have to say. But Steve, do you want to make any comment to the report here?
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, we thought we'd do this report just so that, for as much as our own curiosity, obviously, as elected members, about where we think we might land with these extraordinary times that we find ourselves in. And as the report really touches on, the real area of risk is the swimming pool and or multi-sports complex, where a decent amount of revenue is derived from fees, charges and admissions. Ironically, a lot of councils that have had quite extensive forays into other activities have experienced a lot more acute problems than ourselves. But in the main, it's really regulatory, including parking, and obviously there's building and resource consent fees that are down, but the multi-sports complex is the main one. We think there's a hit there. The key thing, this report was prepared by Donna, not knowing as to what level 2 would look like and not knowing when level two would arrive. So there's a little bit of an opportunity now for some of the bleeding in regard to loss of revenue to be apprehended in part by being able to open in part. Building and planning are still open for business and have been conducting themselves throughout the lockdown, although that particular activities, those two activities were quite quite quiet, certainly during level 4. Parking will resume next week. Not that we're going to be going out there with an overzealous attitude. And likewise, the pool and event centre will be able to open in part, but still won't be able to recover the type of ground that we've lost over the last 6 weeks, and nor will it be normal activity resumed. And I guess we also need to factor in that people may well be cautious and may opt to vote with their feet initially, which could see a further reduction in patronage of the multi-sports centre specifically.
Okay, thank you, Steve. So this report is open for discussion or question, and it is a bit of a stab in the dark at this point in time, but certainly the trends, particularly at the multi-sport centre, are not looking that flash in terms of income for the year. So, Councillor Bolger.
If I've got my hand up, it's a mistake.
Okay, right.
I'll lower it.
That's right. Yeah, Councillor.
So, Councillor Highsted, Tracy.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I've got two questions. The first one is just in relation to we've examined revenue over the next 9 months, or for the 9 months to 31 March. Have staff turned their mind to cost during the period? I know that's very difficult, but if we are facing a revenue reduction, are we just taking that on the nose, or are there some measures that are or will be reviewed around costs? Is that perhaps to Donna or to the Chief Executive? I'm not sure who wants to answer that one.
Well, Steve, do you want to make a comment on this one?
Yes, I can, Your Worship. No, cost has certainly been looked at. There's been quite a stringent drive to remove cost if we can, without being too, shall we say, self-harming in our outlook. But of course, we made the call to make redundant the swim instructors, because at that stage, Martin, our manager, had said, look, you can't see that operating until level 1, and level 1, from our view, was quite a way away. Martin at the multi-sports complex has gone through and really tried to efficiently run that facility as much as he can, and some councils will be aware that we were even looking at potentially having an adverse effect on the neighbouring ice rink, just to try and keep those costs as low as possible. So that certainly yeah, it's not just in the multi-sports complex. Across the board, we are looking at what we can do to save money. And that is not just for this financial year. It's reflected in our budgeting for next year, which that should be the subject of a public discussion in the coming to try and drive down costs, look at how we can save to minimise the impact to the ratepayer.
Thank you.
I had a second part to my question. Now this is a long bow, but I'm hoping the chair will let me take this angle. Our procurement policy, sort of closely related, our procurement policy, and I'm thinking here about ensuring that the emphasis on buy local is appropriate in our policy. Would it be appropriate that we get a report from the Chief Executive reasonably soon just around that, ensuring that we're putting a real emphasis on local? I know it hasn't been that long ago we reviewed it, but just in the current environment, every dollar we can spend in our town, as long as it's value for money, would probably be a bit of.
Yep. I think that's appropriate. So you're able to put that together, Steve?
Can I just get some clarification? Do you want to report on the application of the policy or the review of the policy settings?
A little bit of both, I guess. How it's actually working, and if you could see any potential to increase emphasis without putting undue cost on council.
Right.
And we may have already done that because it's quite recent, but I think the community needs to know that we are seriously considering all avenues that we can spend locally to support business.
Good point. And as it's been said already, it's not that long ago that we went through this with a fine-tooth comb and made some quite big changes to it. But it would be good to see what the application of those changes looks like, and are there any opportunities for refinement along the way? So, okay, Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question for Steve. With the changes that the government made to the wage subsidy applications, have we applied for that for the pool for the closure because of the limit? We fall into that $30,000 loss bracket.
Through Your Worship, it's our intention to do so for the multi-sports complex. I can't tell you exactly where that application is. I know Martin McKewen, the manager, was working on it. There's no guarantee that we'll get it, but my argument is that if you look at that facility in isolation, it has suffered a 30% drop in income for what will be 3 months. And maybe beyond, and so it's worthy of us putting forward an application. And that was the latest advice that we got from the local government expert think tank in Wellington. So that's our intention, but I can't tell you exactly where that is at. It was under development about a week ago. But Donna, do you have any information about whether Martin's completed the application?
I don't believe we're at that point at this stage. I'm still actually in talks with Work and Income to verify whether we can do this on a department basis.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, Councillor Bolger.
Yes.
So you did want to ask a question?
Yes, this is the correct one. The biggest potential for loss in revenue is, of course, our rates deferral scheme, which is a great scheme. And I know, Steve, you want to do it within existing budgets, and I would just wonder if that's pretty optimistic. And somewhere along the line, I imagine you're considering if you'd have to borrow some money. We've just talked about our swaps policy. I guess you'll keep us informed as to how you're going to tackle that, but I can see that being something that's going to rear its ugly head in the next 3 months.
Steve?
Well, to date, I can tell you that the take-up has been quite light on that particular scheme. It's alive and kicking, so it's not posing any problems at this point in time. We did make a commitment that we would report monthly to the council. I would envisage that we would do our first report on that scheme next month. As reported last month, we had a bit of cash in the system. We thought that we'd be able to manage the deferrals through that. Certainly, if the current take-up continues, it won't pose any problems, but it's a matter of just monitoring it month by month, and we'll see what the impact is and whether it is going to be a bigger issue than what we first thought.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Bronwyn, you still got your hand up. Is that from previously? Yep. Okay. Would somebody like to move that that report be received then? Councillor Highsted, seconded Councillor Phillips. Is there any alteration or discussion required? There's not. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, the motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Item 10, health and safety report. Now we have a health and safety report from Human Resources Manager, reasonably straightforward, and just a note there, the fatality of the oxidation ponds, which has been notified by WorkSafe that they will lay charges against the council. So that matter is now subject to a judicial process, and we can't discuss that further in this forum. But it's open for discussion, that item. Councillors, is there any questions or queries of the Human Resources Manager? There's not at this point. Would somebody like to move that it be received? Nick Grant, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Reid, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, the motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Item 11, and we have an annual report from Civic Financial Services and a memo from the Chief Executive. Steve, do you want to make any comment to this one?
Not really, Worship, but explanatory.
Okay, so I think it's reasonably self-explanatory, and it's they had a sale of the building through this period, which has given them quite a boost, I'd have to say. But it's open for discussion. So there's no discussion. Would somebody like to move the receipt, please? Councillor Bolger, seconded Councillor Phillips. Thank you. There's no further discussion. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, the motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Item 12, which is on the electronic version, but it's not listed that way in the paper version. But item 12, the proposed expansion of the urban rating boundaries, and we have a memo from the Chief Executive with a proposal or recommendation to defer that rating boundary review until the 22-23 financial year, just given some of the pressures that the community is under and what it might do to some of these boundaries that would shift across from where they are currently at. But Steve, do you want to make a comment before we open this for discussion?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. The key point here is to emphasise that there is no financial disadvantage to the council in postponing this particular policy decision of the council. And I want to emphasise it's postponement, not cancellation. Staff were all geared and have done a lot of work in actually preparing for the introduction of the new rating boundaries and letters to go to the residents. Bear in mind that it's been a couple of years now since this issue was passionately debated at the last iteration of the long-term plan. But I felt that really that some of these properties are going to have quite a shift in rating incidence. And at this time, where there is households are under, some households are under strain and uncertainty, it seemed to me that it would possibly be poor timing on the council's part and maybe a 2-year deferral to then pick up the process at that time would be a more compassionate stance of the council than just carrying on full speed ahead. So it really is a matter for the council to give a green light or red light to. As I say, there's no financial penalty either way, apart from the effect that the ratepayers will find in terms of rates moving out of rural zone into urban zone, which in some cases would be possibly an increase of $1,000 or more on a rating assessment.
Thank you, Steve. So this item is now open for discussion, but certainly from my perspective, I think this is a good suggestion and one that will ease some burden or ease a potential burden that we have some influence on. So yeah, open for discussion and or recommendation. So do I have any comment from councillors? Councillor Bolger, Councillor Highsted?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to defer it. You start adjusting the rating policy. Sometimes you have unintended consequences, and you've got to do it quite gently and give yourself a wee bit of time to remedy something that's popped up unexpectedly. Obviously, we will have to expand the urban rating boundary in time, but I think this cautious approach is certainly the correct way to go at the moment.
Okay, Councillor Highsted.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, I think everyone around the table is potentially conflicted or impacted by this, but I am in particular a property that will be impacted, so I have no comment on this. But just thinking about this, rating islands and industry connected to urban services, I'm just wondering if it will be appropriate alongside this to ask the CEO to prepare a report just reflecting on the consistency between Gore, Matara and rural for industry connected to urban services. The appropriateness, just to be clear, I'm not suggesting any rate increase or change in rating to those industries, but just how those rates fall into urban and rural. And I'd like at some stage in the near future to see a report from the CEO just reflecting on that.
Yep, good point. Okay, Councillor Davis.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I agree with Councillor Bolger that it's timely that we pause with continuing with this at the moment. A lot of pressure on households and a change for some could be quite devastating at the moment. So I think it's very timely and a good idea to press pause on this. Following on from Councillor Highsted, I think it would be prudent for us to see how large industries are rated and whether it's fair across the board for how they're rated, and it would be good to get some further information on that. So I support his stance on that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Grant, Doug.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Actually, yeah, totally agree with the last three councillors. Councillor Bolger, correct, and yeah, we just can't roll this thing out now. But we also need to, as Councillor Highsted has suggested, we need to figure out where or what these industries are doing, and if they're connected to the urban sewage system or water system, and then have a report. So fully back up those two last suggestions. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Reid and then Councillor Garland.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I agree with Cliff, and also the proposal. I think it's a good one that we just have to be careful and easing people towards that change and shift. This is definitely not the right time. So I'm completely in agreement with that. And I like the idea of a review as well. I think that's probably quite timely. It gives us a little bit of time before we actually make those proposed changes, if that's necessary.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. John?
Yes, when we look at the review, we need to look at both the those industries that are used in the urban services, but they do pay for them. But we do have to take into account they do have an effect on the rural roading, because a lot of them are bringing stock in and milk in from the rural roading, and if that effect's got left back in the rural side.
So I totally agree with the review around the rating islands. We're actually expanding that request a wee bit further now, but I think it's probably quite timely. So is there anybody else wants to make any comment? Still got 4 hands up at this stage. Glenys, okay, it's Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, I'd just like to support this recommendation, but also support an evenly distribute the urban rural rates for those businesses that are outside the urban area. I think, and I do support a report on that because I think it is timely as well.
Okay. Right, so don't see Councillor Bolger, do you?
Yes, yes, Your Worship. It seems to be a desire to gather, some of industries that are presently rated as rural industries into the urban ward, and that's a very generous offer. But of course, I'll take Councillor Gardine's point, some of those industries also incur costs which are imposed on rural ratepayers. So once again, let's not just get too complicated. By all means, have a review and just find out where we're going to land. But if you try to alter, the more things you try to alter at one time, the more opportunities there is to for things to go awry. I guess this we'll call it a debate. Let's call it a discussion. Has really been prompted by Matera Valley Milk and their impact on the community, and it's been well pointed out in the past that they do use urban infrastructure services, but they pay for that access, and so they and probably pay a little bit over their costs. So I would by all means have a review, but I'd really use some caution there with just making too expensive or too radical a change all at the one time. Thank you.
Yeah, I take the point that Councillor Bolger is making, and I guess we've got to be careful not to make assumptions as to what might happen or what even the motivation for this review is. But the original request, correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Highsted, was to just have a look at rating islands and see if they are fulfilling the role that we created them for. In fact, I think we've only got one from my understanding, which is in Matera, the heavy industry rating island down there. But the discussion's gone on further to commercial and industrial operators that are, no matter where they are they being rated fairly? Is that what we're asking for? It is quite a big review, I would suggest, and maybe perhaps if I could ask Steve, do you want to make a comment here in terms of the practicalities of or the size of what we're asking you for?
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. I don't see it being a huge review. It's timely. I would probably approach it in 2 bites, and so I think first of all would be a report around what is our current rating practice and philosophy when it comes to major industry, and what are some of the commonalities and what are some of the peculiarities. And then I would probably pause at that point, open it for a discussion or maybe a workshop environment to see if we can further refine what the problem is and then work our way from that point onwards.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Highsted and then Councillor Dulles.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just to clarify, I was asking for a review of rating islands and consistency between Gore, Matera and rural, because we do have one example that seems to be quite isolated. Just as you say, a decision made, some information for councillors to consider, no agenda.
Councillor Davis?
You're just following on from that. I was just going to reply to Councillor Bolger and just say that it's let's wait and see, because we'll get the review and we'll have a workshop around what that presents to us, and as a council we will make some decisions, I suppose, whether we're doing it correctly and we're happy with how things are looking, or whether we need to make some changes. But I think it is timely. Thank you.
Okay, so there are no other comments or questions. Now my understanding of what's being suggested is that we're asking for a review of the consistency and appropriateness of the heavy industry rating island that we currently have, and how it could be or is apportioned across the district into the future. So if I'm correct there, would somebody like to move in that direction? Councillor Highsted, thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Bolt, thank you. Is there any further discussion? If there's not, I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, the motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. We needed to extend that. I'm sorry. I just need to go back 1 second. We've moved that we're going to have a review. The recommendation that came from the urban rating boundary report was that we defer it. So we actually need to move that that motion as well. Would somebody like to move that be adopted? Councillor Dixon, thank you. Seconded, Councillor Reid, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, the motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, councillors, I think that brings us to the end of the open agenda. We do have some business to be transacted in committee. So I'd move that the public be excluded from the following parts of the proceedings of this meeting, namely the items listed below. Confirmation of minutes from extraordinary meetings, confirmation of minutes from the ordinary meeting of council held 15 April, confirmation of the minutes of the council and committee meeting held 22 April, other business, update on land negotiations, water treatment plants upgrade, WorkSafe versus the Gore District Council, and Howell Road Bridge. Would somebody like to second that we discuss those in committee? Thank you, Councillor Bolger. All those in favour, please say aye.